So it's been about a year since the American release of Fire Emblem Fates on 3DS, or around my birthday in Japan, and has sold very well, about 1.4 million. With sales numbers like that, the game sounds like it was a success. But why is the game so heavily panned? Well, I can't speak for everyone as to why they don't like the game. I do have my own reasons of why I think this game was possibly one of the weakest entries in the series. Now, most of my experience is from Revelations, and only got to Birthright and Conquest last month. So what I have to say about those two may not be 100% correct. So if I'm wrong about something, or if you don't agree with what I say, feel free to express your thoughts in the comment section below. Now, with Awakening, it was planned to be the last game in the series, only for the sales to blow up, making the game a huge success, along with introducing a lot of newcomers to the series. While Awakening has some problems of its own, I can really appreciate what Awakening has done. It makes me really glad that it exists. Never would I imagine playing Fire Emblem on a mobile device, having a spin-off game of the series, along with Nintendo giving the series so much attention. And all this is possible just because of how well Awakening, along with Fates, did. And of course, when you have a series that's dying off and then suddenly one of your games revives the series, making it stronger than ever, of course you would want to copy what that game did when making another installment of the series. So even though I really don't like how some things are in Fates just because it was in Awakening, I can't be upset with why they would do that. Of course, it's more of a matter of how well it was done. Let's go back and look at Awakening. I won't go too far into what was wrong in that game, but I will talk about some of its flaws that relate to Fates in some way. The first thing I think I should get out of the way are the second seals.
They break the game.
Now, what Fates did to try to fix the problem revolved around the many different seals in the game. They allowed you to change a character to different classes, with each one having a limitation or a rule to them with how they work. It allows a lot of customization, and it doesn't reset your levels, so you can't just cap your stats by resetting your level number. Then there's the Eternal Seals that you can get in-game, which can allow characters to gain 5 more levels once they hit level 20 when promoted, allowing you to break the characters without breaking the game, since they also cost a lot of gold. Let's say you change somebody's class, but you missed a skill that they could have learned. Well, don't worry, because when they level up, they'll just learn the skill that they missed anyway. Of course, one at a time. This is a huge improvement over the reclassing system in Awakening, and I really welcome this change highly. Another thing that broke the game was the pair-up system. Basically, you would pair up 2 units, and the main unit of the 2 would gain stat bonuses. The partner unit would also help in battle as well. In Awakening, they would both attack and block in attack, with the chances of those happening more likely depending on their support rank. Having married units together pretty much made them untouchable. Fates gave this newer feature a new spin. If you have 2 units next to each other, the unit next to the unit performing an action will help out offensively, having their own damage output, hit chance, and crit chance. However, if you want defensive support, you just pair 2 units up, and if a unit is attacked by an enemy with offensive support, the partner unit will block it when paired up. There's also a meter that fills up with each action. When it fills up, the partner unit will protect the main unit from the enemy unit that's attacking them. Also, enemy units can use the pairing system as well, adding more that you would have to consider when trying to figure out what the enemies will do. I should also mention the weapons in this game don't break, but instead they can boost or lower stats when equipped. The stronger weapons hinder you to the point that they're not really worth using all the time, which has you switching between different weapons. I like this idea, but it's not perfect. Sometimes the hindering of said weapon can be a bit too drastic, such as my main health going down for a turn or 2. And the weaker weapons like the Bronze Sword, which has plus 10 evade, makes no changes other than letting me do less damage. I think the weight system in the older games did a good job with this, with heavier weapons lowering your speed, along with lowering your hit rate and evasion. Even though weapons break in those games, you're still switching through different weapons since some weapons are more useful at different times. Of course, they can also do some rebalancing with the buffs and debuffs weapons can give. With all that said, it doesn't sound so terrible that they borrowed a lot from Awakening, since it's clear that Intelligent Systems still wants to improve on what Awakening did, but that's not really the case with everything. Let's talk about the supports. In Fire Emblem, you could have 2 characters form a bond with each other while fleshing out their characters. Awakening did improve on how supports function, but with these supports in Awakening, it feels just more like shipping characters together, seeing how most of the supports a character can have are usually the opposite gender that they can marry, with characters not really having too many supports of other characters of the same gender. Some character supports are solely for the player character, and having no development whatsoever. Now, this is a bit of a double-edged sword. Because of the matchmaking supports, this allows characters to get more support conversations with other characters, which can add more to a character, while some supports feel lazy or just shoehorned in. There's even some characters with supports with the depth of a puddle. especially when a lot of characters are just as engaging as some cardboard. There is also the child system that was lazily tossed in, which I think everything that could be said about that has been said to death already. Of course, problems aren't just solely based around repeating things from Awakening. It has quite a few issues of its own that I'd like to talk about, both on the enjoyment side along with design-wise. Before I get into that, I think I should get Phoenix Mode out of the way since I've talked about it already. I'm just going to simply leave it at, the setting is unneeded and it takes away any sort of challenge from the game. So my castle. It's a nice new feature that allows you to customize your base, where you can put in shops and stuff. This isn't a bad thing, but I will ask about one thing. Why do we need a prison? Basically what the prison does, it allows you to capture enemies, with just 2 certain characters, and allows a generic enemy to join your ranks. This may sound cool on paper until you realize that Fates has the biggest roster in the entire series, with them pretty much being better than any generic unit since they can get personal skills. You could say that's there to raise your numbers back up for those playing on Classic Mode, but here's the problem. Unless you're playing Revelations, you're only going to have 1 character that can capture units. So if they die, it kind of defeats the purpose. With how Fates is designed, prisons really don't make any sense. What about the maps? They really differ between each of the 3 versions. The maps in Birthright are just, well, really bland and really have nothing going for them most of the time. To me, Birthright was so boring that I just ended up stopping after Chapter 11, and then went on to some other games. And then you have Revelations maps. With each chapter, I feel like the game has the need to throw a gimmick at me, with them being either hit or miss. And they're mostly misses. Who wants to shovel up snow where enemies could be hidden in the snow without you knowing where? I most certainly don't want to do that. Or how about waiting and taking turns to use an elevator to get to another small area of the map? Let's not forget about the one where you have walls that randomly go up and down on a really large map with no terrain, only for it to throw you into another map with no saves in between, and gives you units that can't fight for themselves, which you are forced to use them within that chapter. Sounds really fun, eh? Or what about the map with the red and blue tiles that make unpromoted units into promoted units and vice versa? Or at least that's what the game claims, because when I played the map, it didn't work. With the exception of one enemy that was a sword master and then became a samurai. It was only that guy, I have no idea why. That's just what happened. You can probably tell I really don't enjoy these maps in Revelations. To put it simply, the maps in Revelations try way too hard to be different, only for it to bog down the game by either slowing the game down and or just not being fun at all. What about Conquest? Is it garbage as well? With Conquest, I feel like the maps had a lot more effort put into them, although I feel some maps really want you to play in a very specific way, not just for being the map, but for getting everything within the map, which I actually kind of like that, basically being where the better you do in a map, the better reward you'll get. Conquest designs their maps, mostly, around the units that you would have at the given time. And even with the not as hard maps, it feels really rewarding to clear a map. Chapter 10's map is honestly my personal favorite, where it's a defense mission and you have to hold 3 different points down, along with needing to deal with flying units that can just go around those choke points. And then near the end of the chapter, the water drains, which causes the map to be more open, taking away your choke points. This map is truly designed for what it needs to be, and not just trying to be a special snowflake of a map. And I really like the maps in Conquest because of that. Also, Fates introduced these things called Dragon Veins. I honestly don't like these, and they just feel unneeded. Granted, there are times where they do add more depth to the map, but it's usually used to trigger something, and sometimes forces you to use them to even beat a level, rather than being something that you can use as part of something that you can take advantage of, and bring things to your favor. Plus, it also causes a lot of problems with Revelations as well with its gimmicks. Going back to the different versions, can I ask why each different version is a separate cost? The game's main selling point is making this big choice of who you want to side with, which is pointless since the choice was already made because of the version you bought. And the special edition of the game has all 3 versions in it, so it's not like it can't be done. Now, not everything is terrible on its own in Fates. Even though I think a lot of characters in this game are really lacking and don't bring much to the table, there are some units that are really well done. A fairy pain Nyx. And if all the characters had that same level of depth into their characters and personalities with their supports, Fates could have the best roster of characters in the entire series. While I didn't have a lot of fun in Revelations, I did get a lot of mileage out of it because of multiplayer, which is a really big step up from Shadow Dragon. And yes, Shadow Dragon did have a versus mode. The improved multiplayer really complements my castle, along with learning skills that other players gave to their characters, which your corresponding characters can also learn. I also really like the soundtrack of this game. It's not on the same level as Radiant Dawn, but it still has one of the better track lists from any Fire Emblem game. I also really like some of the new classes introduced in this game as well. I really like the idea of having to choose between which side you want to fight for, and it could really make an interesting story. Speaking of the story, it was a complete mess between all three versions of the game. I really don't like how it's structured since some of these chapters feel like filler and really don't need to exist. But is there a way to fix the story mode of Fates? Well,